Hello world, it's Travis Bowlin. Today we are going to build the Meinl Cajon box drum kit. One of the first things you always want to do when starting a kit or a project is read the instructions one by one all the way before you start. This project's only coming in at about 10 steps, so it shouldn't take us much time to complete it. Second thing you're going to do is make sure you got all your pieces. Here you see we have two sides. We have a top and a bottom, a back, a front, feet, two snares, your screws for the front, screws for the feet, screws for the snares, two straps to hold it together, screwdriver, glue, a couple of sanding blocks, and a right angle to keep your sides all together. Keep in mind some things you'll need is some extra sandpaper, a small drill bit and a drill, a mallet, and a damp rag. Alright, now let's jump right on into it. Okay, first of all, we're going to take the sides, top and bottom, and we're going to glue them together. It's tongue and groove, so you slide the glue that they provide you into the grooves, and then you'll just set the coordinating pieces on top and use a mallet to kind of work them in. And you can see here that I'm working the glue that they had provided. Here you can see after I've seated it, I use the mallet to kind of work it into the right place so there's no hangover. And you can see there the wet rag I was using to wipe off any excess glue that runs out or gets on your hands. What I'm doing here is pointing out that I know that's the top because it's got a couple little holes in there where the snares go, so I knew that was the top piece. Go ahead and put some glue in that. A nice generous amount of glue, I'd say. It was just enough glue for the project that they provided. You can see there that I'm getting that on there, wiping excess glue, using the mallet to kind of make sure it's all lined up right. Little square piece of wood I was telling you about earlier they provide is as a right angle. So when you're strapping the cajon together for it to be glued, you can check all your angles and your sides and make sure they're flush and even. And they say to let it dry like this for about 120 minutes. And here I'm continuing to check for any glue and wiping that off before it dries, any glue overage. At this point in the project, we're ready to add the snares, which kind of give it the snare drum sound on the top part of the cajon, while the bottom part has more of a bass drum sound. So I'm trying to spot those holes that I had pointed out earlier where these snares screw in. One thing I can say is they had pre-drilled holes, but they really weren't all that big, so I ended up having, after I tried to screw the screws in there, I ended up having to pull them out and getting the drill bit and making the holes a little bit bigger. And you'll see that here. I used a Sharpie marker to draw a line on the drill bit so I knew how far I could go into the wood without going completely through it. They provided a screwdriver, but for this particular angle, it was better to use a screwdriver that was a little longer. The next step you want to do is take your sanding block and sand the front a little bit just to smooth it out, knock off any rough edges so your front part that you'll be hitting will lay smoothly. This is something they stress very heavily in the instructions. The sanding blocks they provide are very fine grit, so I do recommend you getting some thicker grit sandpaper to help knock off some of the really rough edges that the lighter grit isn't able to. As you can see here, I'm laying the face plate of the instrument. This is called the tappa. This is the part of the instrument that you hit. There weren't any pre-drilled holes in the wood, so I again had to use my drill to drill the holes and then line up the screws. This part actually took quite a bit of time. At this point, I had to let it dry for about 2 hours, so I came back to it a little later. At this point, it's pretty well together other than the back part hasn't been glued. I'm just doing a little cleaning up after I took the straps off and just making sure all the screws are tight and flush. Now you see I'm preparing to install the back plate and go ahead and add my bead of glue. Like I said, just had enough for this project with the glue that they provided. I was squeezing every little bit of it out of there here at the end. The back panel had a really nice fit. It just laid in there really good. You see I'm using my damp rag to get the excess glue off again. I'm going to go ahead and put my straps on again, but I'm going to put them on the opposite way. Once again, you let it sit to dry for I believe an hour to 90 minutes on the second go around. Once I came back to it after the glue had dried, I took it one step further and I stained all the kind of bare, natural color wood there. Tried to give it kind of just an old, kind of brownish, barn-looking, worn look. During the staining process, this was when a lot more sanding came into play. And that thicker grit sandpaper that I had really did help, so I encourage you all to get a little bit of that if you build this project. Yeah, the sanding and the staining took the most time. I know the staining was kind of an extra step myself, but definitely took a lot of sanding because I really wanted all the edges to be nice and smooth and even. At this point, I've come to one of the last steps, adding the rubber feet to the bottom of the instrument. There were no pre-drilled holes at this step, so again I had to use my drill and bit. The last step here, which is another step that I've added, is I've taken a little bit of oil to moisturize the wood and to give it a little bit of a shine. And here it is, the final product in all its glory. Pretty happy with how it turned out. Let's take the time to play it and rate it. I rated this kit an overall 8 out of 10. I think it's a great kit, great sounding instrument. Just be nice if they pre-drilled the holes and offered thicker grit sandpaper. Thanks for watching the Kit Pit. We'll see you next time. Subscribe now for the latest videos.